Hey, this is JD Frost, and welcome to the Daily Ledger podcast. I have a very special guest today, Chandler Arnold, and he's with Untraditional Philanthropy. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about legacy, a little bit about philanthropy and giving back and creating legacies. And Chandler, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
One of the first questions I love to ask everybody is it's kind of a hard one, but give me your journey in 75 seconds or less.
Sounds great. So I grew up in a small town in the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina, Western North Carolina. Went to a public school, super rural area, and we always understood growing up if we wanted to make a big difference or follow big dreams, that education was the way to do that. I went to Harvard and studied social change in American history, and then got an MBA out at Stanford later. Worked in the private sector a while with Coca-Cola and the Boston Consulting Group. But JD, my passion was always with social impact and social change. And I got the opportunity to come lead a group within a fabulous organization called First Book, which gives free books and educational resources to kids in need. Ultimately, I was the COO there for about 15 years. An amazing team. Together, we distributed 160 million brand new books to kids in need. But as we prepared for our second child, I realized that something needed to change. Candidly, JD, I was exhausted. Fundraising for an organization like that, even one that's doing everything right, is actually super difficult. I'd get $1 million gift. I'd throw a ticker tape parade in the hallways, and I'd get back to my desk and open my spreadsheet and realize, oh, wow, I need to do that 20 more times this year.
Yeah, never
So I
stop.
realized, what the world needs is not a bunch of new organizations tackling the same social problems, but really a new approach to philanthropy that channels funding more efficiently and more powerfully to social entrepreneurs doing amazing work. And Untraditional Philanthropy was born.
Awesome. And tell me a little bit more about what you just said, because my family, we've got a foundation. And so the last couple of years, we've, gone through this exercise of, it's a private foundation. So you have to give away 5% of the assets every single year. And, it's hard to give away money. I mean, it's a pretty big responsibility to do that. And so tell me a little bit about what you were saying that you were giving to organizations. I wish I could say it exactly what you said. You're giving to organizations that are carrying out the same mission, and how what you're doing now is kind of solving that problem. Or maybe I misunderstood you.
No, JD, you've got it, man. I think that what we often have is a disconnect in our society between awesome folks like you who want to give money to great groups that are advancing education or women's rights or cancer research or whatever the cause might be. But a lot of times there's a disconnect between those people and who they know and the people that are running those organizations that are doing the best work. And a lot of times from the outside, it's hard to tell which organizations are actually moving the needle.
Yes.
So the
Okay.
social change world is small, and I've run organizations over the past 25 years and have figured out not only how to kind of do the due diligence to understand who's really moving the needle, but also have developed relationships with people who are running these organizations. I'm 47 now, so when we all started out, we were at the bottom of the rung, but now we're kind of getting up there to run these groups. So a lot of what I do is kind of make connections to understand from foundations and individuals what their causes and what their passions are, and help them connect not only to the right group, but to figure out how to really get involved with that group's work. Maybe they want to just write a check, or maybe they want to also get involved in other ways.
Gotcha. So you're kind of like a liaison between the maybe the foundations and the donors, as well as the nonprofit organizations and or however you want to label.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a big part of what we do.
Yeah.
And a related part is helping folks. Maybe you're exiting a company and you want to make a tax deductible charitable gift, but you've been so busy running that company for the past 30 years that you haven't had time to figure out sort of what your passion really is, much less understanding who's doing work in that space. So it's kind of about getting to know the people and their values and goals,
Okay.
and then connecting them not just to an organization that'll take the check, because anyone will take the check, but
Right.
to an organization that's going to use the check to really drive impact in measurable ways.
Right, and in ways that you would want them to have impact, just
It-
based on your personality. So it sounds like you kind of almost interview the business owner and kind of learn more about them and then provide recommendations based off that consultation?
yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So, you know, read a little bit about your biography and everything, and kind of your background. And man, I love the Harvard thing. Like, I mean, I have mad respect for anybody that's associated with that organization, obviously. But
Well, being a
um,
hillbilly, I think they thought I would show up with straw in my hair and maybe not being used to indoor plumbing, but
oh yeah, definitely.
it was a great experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. But you've worked with some huge companies over the years, and also some pretty high profile people. Is that correct? I mean, what has that been like from a social impact perspective? And how has that kind of changed your mindset around what you're doing today? Was that mostly stuff you were doing in the past, or is that more of what you are actually doing today?
It's a great question, and JD, as I look back over my career, I've been super lucky. Worked with a lot of Fortune 500 companies. Disney, Target, Pizza Hut, Random House, and fantastic philanthropists like Dolly Parton and others. And some of that was with the first book, some of that is in the work I'm doing now. And when I think back to kind of the commonalities, I think, whether it's a big group like Disney, and we planned an initiative called the Magic of Storytelling that was across all of their stations, all of their parks, all of their stores, or someone like Dolly who for that initiative, we were looking at folks who were affected by hurricanes and national disasters and wanted to get books to them. Those large scale initiatives, whether it's a family or a corporation or a foundation, they do have a lot in common. And I think it comes down to really thinking authentically about sort of your goals, either as a corporation or as a foundation or as a person, and how you develop a strategy, just like any business, how
Yeah,
you sort of get a strategy from A to B. And I think one skill there, I used to think my expertise was building spreadsheets or developing impact plans or strategic plans. And I think my special sauce is the ability to kind of get to know someone quickly, to build trust quickly, and then have that sort of real conversation about not only what they want to achieve, but sort of what the challenges and stumbling blocks might be. I was talking with I'll make this hypothetical, but I was talking to a Fortune 500 and said, hey, what do you want to accomplish? And they said, oh, well, we want to help kids in need. And I kind of giggled and I said, I sort of called them out a little bit and said, that's what my mama would call the Sunday school answer. It's the answer that you think you're supposed to say. And
yep,
it's part of the truth, but, tell me more and tell me about the realities and the challenges. And then, groups like that will open up and say, well, yes, we want to help kids in need, but we've also got this PR problem in the Southeast, or we've got employees saying that their morale is low because they're not feeling meaningful connection to the work that they're doing. And once you begin to get answers like that, whether it's a corporation or a family or an individual, then you've got sort of magic stuff to work with. So in that example, instead of just writing a check to a children's organization, the organization created an employee engagement platform in the Southeast United States. It ended up getting a lot of earned media and public awareness. So you've got happier employees doing more meaningful work, feeling better about their jobs, earning media in a market that they needed media in. and, helping those kids in need. So I
Right.
think it's about having those can be kind of tough conversations up front, sometimes with families, for example, like the grandparents' generation and the parents' generation and the children's generation may have three different sets of priorities, but you can't solve those challenges until you can talk about those challenges
Right. Yeah.
and define what that end goal is going to be. And I think that's the thing that we do really well.
Yeah. Gotcha. How many people are on your team?
Well, there are a few of us that do the consulting work, but the part that I'm really proud of is we've built a network of about 40, right now it's 43, we call them subject area experts. And these are people running their own nonprofit organizations or have huge expertise in some other category. People like Alex Gier, who's the CEO of Donors Choose. Priti Krishnan just won a MacArthur Genius Award for her work with IMAC. David Green, who was the host of Morning Edition for NPR. These are people that have deep expertise in their subject matter. So if I'm talking to a client that, I don't know, wants to, support women's organizations around the world, I can call Delaney Steele, who's one of our subject area experts and a buddy of mine for 20 years, who's the board chair of an international organization called Women for Women that's pairing
Okay.
and supporting women entrepreneurs, doing work in war-torn regions around the country. So I think, while I do live in DC, I am perhaps unique in that I kind of own the fact that I don't have all the answers, but we've built this network of experts who can come in and give additional sort of bespoke advising in their subject areas.
Yeah, so I mean, your network obviously is the value that you're bringing, and then also your individual skill of being able to get to know somebody and understand what their passion might be if they've been solely focused on their business or solely focused on their family their whole life, and now they gotta give away this money and they don't know what organization to use. That's why they would be coming to you.
Yeah, I do think it's that combination. When I started, I sort of realized, yeah, I know a lot about education or literacy or scaling proven models, but I don't know. I'm not an expert in climate change or racial equity, but I know these people who are, and I
Sure.
think embracing that limitation and building out a model that makes that stronger than any one person can be has really been a liberating experience. And it's great to just to increase those conversations between donors and social entrepreneurs. Let's say they might have that conversation with Delaney, learning about Women for Women's work, and maybe they fall in love with Women for Women and make it a donation to that organization. Fantastic. Or maybe not. But even if not, they've learned, what are the hot topics on the front lines? What are best practices that are emerging in the field? What is that organization learning from that I, as a donor, can benefit from in my own work? And I
Yeah.
think, we've talked for a long time about the ways that nonprofits can benefit from donors. And I think this really also embraces the way that donors can learn from and increase the impact of their giving based on what they learn from these people on the front lines.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Can you tell me a little bit more about like how you came up with the name Untraditional Philanthropy? Like, what's the untraditional part versus the
well,
traditional part? Because
well,
it's a little bit of a passion of mine on the untraditional way of doing things.
I mean, I always have had a little bit of a unique point of view, but I mean, JD, if I'm really honest, I was at one of the premier social enterprises in the country. We were given lectures at top business schools and had won kind of all the awards that nonprofits can win from the World Economic Forum and Schwab and all of these groups. And I'm, a privileged white man with these fancy degrees. And it was still super hard for me to raise money, even when I was on a first name basis with college roommates who were at big investment banks. And I just kind of scratched my head one day and I was like, how in the world is, a Black woman with a GED who's running an amazing soup kitchen in Anacostia who doesn't have these connections. How in the world is she supposed to fundraise?
Right.
And I begin to think that we've got an opportunity to kind of bring more people into these discussions. And frankly, JD, if traditional philanthropy were capable of solving all of our problems, the world would be a very different place than it is today. And so I am not against philanthropy, and there's been a lot of fantastic things that have happened over the years. But I also think that the industry and the sector have an opportunity to evolve, and there are things that we can do, looking at more unrestricted grants, looking at more long-term commitments. I mean, I must have spent an obscene amount of my time filling out grant reports that candidly no one ever read. So I'm not the first to ever point to any one of these things, but I think taken together, we have the opportunity to really sort of help evolve the field, to drive more impact for the causes, and really make the actions and the act of supporting these organizations more meaningful for the families and individuals who are making the gifts.
But tell me what that really means. Like, give me an example of, like, tell me what that means.
So I think one is sort of leveling the playing field. Okay, so I'll be super honest.
I love that. Like, get down to it, because I'm telling you, like, before you say what you say, like, I'll help you get super honest. Like, I think that most philanthropic organizations are full of crap, because, like, if they were really solving the problem, then people would truly be impacted. And the work that we've been able to do with one-on-one relationships has been far more advanced work, I believe, and like actually putting the time into the relationship rather than just handing them a check and saying, hey, put this into your program, because it doesn't work unless you're actually putting the time in, which that's the thing. None of us want to give our time, and it's uncomfortable and it's weird and it's not normal. And but what happens is, like, it starts to just be crazy, crazy impactful. And I've worked with a group of guys here in Chattanooga for the last 4 years. It's been 4 years. That's a long time. And now we're just now starting to see the exponential effect to it. And so I guess thanks for letting me share that before you're like, hey, I'm going to be super honest. So I'll let you talk for a minute.
No, JD, you made a safe space for me to say what I want to say, and it builds on that. I think a big piece is about candid conversations. And I think one kind of elephant in the room that no one has really been talking about is candid conversations sort of presume that both parties are equal. But I can tell you, when I was on the side that was receiving the grants, it's hard. It's and JD, my grant reports were things of beauty.
I
And,
bet
and
they
they were
were.
honest. And, it was easy to talk about all the great things that we were doing. But what's really hard for nonprofits to do? It's really hard to talk about failure. It's really hard to talk about struggles that you're having to a funder. And so then this sort of vicious cycle starts when the organizations aren't talking about the hard things. So the funders don't accurately understand the challenges, and that can kind of spiral out of control. But when you are lucky enough to be in a situation like the one that you describe, where you have this trusted relationship, and it's much more, I'm not saying the playing field is ever completely equal, but it's much more equal, so that I, as a nonprofit, can say, look, this way that you've structured the gift is super problematic to the way that we've structured our program. Is it possible for us to explore other ways to do this? Because if we switch this one thing, these 5 outcomes are going to be increased 2 or 3-fold. And that real talk is a thing that the sector is missing out on a lot of. But it's weird, because in the private sector, people applaud that real talk. Investors, VCs, they really want to get down in the trenches and have those tough discussions and then figure out how they can strengthen those weakest part of their investment companies to make them thrive. And so I think a lot of it is sort of bringing that private sector approach, and running with it. I mean, one
Yeah,
more example
totally.
that I'll give you is folks in the, I've got a bunch of friends who do a lot of VC investing, and the number one thing that they invest in is the leadership team. They really look into the leadership team, into the individuals in those roles. And in many cases, that leadership makeup is more important than the business model or the strategic plan. But those same people, when they donate to a nonprofit, especially a very large gift, they're not doing the same due diligence or the same examination of the leadership team. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But when you apply that same kind of stringent attention to the leadership team to figure out how you can invest in them and give them rocket fuel to do their work more powerfully, my God, like get out of
Right.
the way,
And
because that's
and
when impact really happens.
yeah, and you said it earlier, you're like more unrestricted funds. I mean, these nonprofits, like they need to be able to allocate resources where they need them. Like, because one day, I mean, when you make that gift in 5 months, the whole economic circumstances could have changed, or the circumstances could have changed inside their organization. They might need to hire this person rather than this person that they were planning on use that money for, and then they got to go back. So it's like this idea of like philanthropists. Yeah, it's great, but you're still trying to have control over the money wherever it's going while it's in that other organization. And that it doesn't happen inside the private sector when you're talking about businesses. Like, look, yeah, I just had an investor put a significant amount of money into our business. He didn't tell me where to put it.
Yeah, he's
Like,
not going to tell
he
you to use
knows.
this
Yeah,
email system versus that email
right.
system.
I mean,
He's going to
that's
trust
just
you to run your
nuts.
business.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with you. Like there, and if it had been working well, then why are they not having more of an impact too? And that's the thing where I have a big passion for actually helping, like really listening to the issues. I think you're talking about a little bit, and then actually providing some help. They might not even need money. They might actually need your time, like at the board meeting, to actually make some decisions or just pass along knowledge of how to run an organization, whatever
A
that would be.
100%. I
Yeah.
think that's another thing that we really focus on in terms of thinking about philanthropy as more than just writing a check. Now, checks are
Yes.
great. When I was running an organization, I appreciated checks, and it's an important part. But I can't tell you the number of times when a donor made made a donation to an organization that I was running, and then I discovered, oh, and again, just to protect people, this is a hypothetical, but like, let's say that donor was the CEO of a technology company, and she made I don't know, a $10,000 gift. Well, that's lovely, but the fact that she's the CEO of a technology company, I might be in a situation where we're, I don't know, needing to hire a new chief technology officer. And could she share that job description with her network? Could she help me interview applicants? Could she do a quarterly call with that person to help him or her get up to speed? That kind of in-kind contribution of the skills and experiences that she spent a whole career building dwarfs the value of that $10,000 gift.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And by the way, it deepens her commitment to the organization because she feels invested in a part of it, making it much more likely that she's going to give a larger check later on. So there's that virtuous circle coming into
Yeah.
play.
Yeah. So let me take a little bit of a turn here too on, the idea of charitable giving and how that is a tax deduction. After all, I am a CPA. So we have some significant, excuse me, we have some significant tax structures that we help our clients put together in order for there to be a charitable intent, a charitable gift that's made, and linking them up with charities that are able to benefit from that. I'm a little bit fed up myself of the way that some resources, at least from the government, are like redeployed, and we're trying to share all this money through whatever programs there are out there, whatnot. I love entrepreneurs being able to decide where their funds go, whether it's through donor advised funds or they link up with a specific charity. What has your experience been like with entrepreneurs, more than those Fortune 500 businesses or larger? corporations. What's your experience been like with those entrepreneurs, and how do you help them from time to time?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you mentioned this because I just want to kind of say, like I, having lived in the social impact world for a long time, there are some folks out there who consider themselves to be purists who think, well, I don't want to ever do anything with corporations, or I don't ever want to do anything with folks that are, quote, just looking for a tax deduction. And I feel like that is not only narrow-minded, but erroneous in terms of missing giant opportunities to drive larger impact. So I can tell you at First Book, we got a lot of gifts from a lot of great people who were making donations in part because they were looking for tax deductions. Well, you know what, folks, that is the way that our country runs, and we wrote these laws to facilitate that. And I am all for people maximizing their tax benefit in association with a gift to an organization that's going to do a big heap of good. So just to say that out loud, and I think it's also a really great opportunity, especially with entrepreneurs and founders, to kind of align. Let's say, for example, someone is selling a company and they're looking at an exit situation. And I know you all do some really fantastic work with exactly those types of clients. It's a great opportunity for them to think about, and I am not a tax expert, so I do not advise people on that structure. You all and your colleagues do that. But once someone has decided to make a gift, and once someone has decided the sort of timeline and the structure of that gift, and that's your piece, I've really enjoyed working with your team and others to think about, okay, how do we maximize the impact of that gift? How can we think really carefully, and legacy building comes into this, like, how can we tie that gift into the work that the company did, into values that were important to the founder, into things that are personally meaningful to that individual, so that the impact of that can grow over and above the sort of tax benefit. And that's where we get into things about, like, in addition to making a gift, which, people could go online to Charity Navigator and choose any number of reputable groups to give money to. I think there's a lot of ways that I found working with founders to make it more meaningful to them to do that screening of leadership teams, to find the right connection, to think about, are there board opportunities? Are there sort of informal ambassador opportunities? Are there skills-based volunteer opportunities that the founder or the spouse can do? There are also some families that say, look, this is a family business. We've got 2 or 3 generations of folks involved. We're looking for ways that each of them can get involved. And, donor advised funds give lots of opportunities for that as well. So I think it's not a cookie cutter solution. And, especially with larger gifts, these are incredibly personal decisions to these founders. And I think having someone that understands enough about business to speak their language, yet also understands enough about way effective nonprofits can grow and scale, to sort of be that intermediary, can be a really powerful pairing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I've had some incredible experiences, like I was saying, over the last 4 years, working with some guys that used to be in prison. They're a part of reentry. And I'm telling you, you want to start having some real impact on your community directly. Get involved with a reentry program somewhere in your community. If you don't know what that is, drop a comment to us, drop an email to us, contact us somehow. I'm sure we can get you contacted with them, because that is what I've found, at least here in Chattanooga. I went to this United Way event one time, and they were talking about 2 Chattanoogas. There's this Chattanooga that's very affluent, and then there's this Chattanooga that just nobody really talks about. And that, it had a huge impact on me, and started a relationship with this guy named Troy Rogers, Tony Oliver, Joe Jenkins, Theo Sanders. Started a relationship with these guys where it wasn't just a tax benefit thing for me, and it hasn't been ever since. it is truly a relationship and an impact that is happening. And I think that you want real impact, start with those type of conversations and those type of relationships, because you find somebody who, at least for me, who had just come out of prison, starting their own business, trying to be an entrepreneur, like, man, that is completely opposite of me, you know, and not whether that's a good thing or a bad thing or whatever, it just is. It's completely opposite, and it's had a huge impact on my life, and my whole thought of philanthropy and really trying to change that next generation or having that social impact. Um, what's your experience been on some of the organizations that you've been involved with? Have you had any kind of like personal stories with that is, you know, besides
Oh,
just the money raised part of it, you know?
oh yeah. And I just want to echo one thing that you said about two Chattanoogas. That is very true. And it's true in cities across the country. There are
Mm,
two DCs, there are two Los Angeleses, there are two Chicagos. I grew up in Marion, North Carolina. There are two Marion, North Carolinas. It's true in small towns too. And and I want to just underscore another thing that you said, and I'll transition to answering your question too. Often starting in one's hometown, or maybe in the town, maybe you live in New York now, but you grew up in Mississippi, starting in that community you grew up in, not only does that make it more meaningful to the donor, it also makes it easier for you to stay connected to that organization, to be involved. You know what's going on in that community, you know the players, you're able to bring in others to the party, so to speak.
mm.
I'm betting that you've probably
Oh
told
yeah.
friends about the work
Net,
you're doing with this program. So
the
that's,
network that's created from this has just been unbelievable, and the relationships between white and black people is completely changed. And it wouldn't have been, sorry to interrupt you, but
no,
it would not have happened without more of that time and education and sharing of knowledge. And man, for my knowledge to grow and empathy to grow and to be able to understand like these differences that we see on the news of, like, you know, police brutality, and I mean all this kind of shit that like that we see
yep,
all the time, and we only see the negative, right? Like we
yep,
never see the video of the people in the room actually getting along, you know?
or people
It's,
helping each other.
yeah, actually helping and like really seeking to understand. So it's something I just get extremely passionate about, and want to continue to explore that part of philanthropy, because man, that's what changes generations. That's
Oh,
what,
it's
you know.
so true. And the example I wanted to mention is exactly along those lines. I've mentioned a lot of household names and big superstar philanthropists, but you don't have to be a Fortune 50 company to make a big difference. I'm working on a project right now with a philanthropist in Western North Carolina, Mitchell County, Blue Ridge Mountains, and she did exactly what we were talking about. She thought about, what were her loves and her passions. She thought about her local community. But as she looked around the community, JD, I'll be honest, she didn't like all of what she was seeing. Very tough job situation. A lot of factories have closed down in that community. A lot of jobs have left the county. They had two really brutally divisive national elections lately, where a lot of politics came into play, and a lot of family members and close friends were really in disagreement. Very different philosophies about COVID in that community. And there was a lot of division. And she was frustrated and wanted to find a way to kind of create unity and also drive economic development. Let's be
Mhm.
candid. A lot of this was coming out of that tough situation, opioids on the rise, et cetera. And she kind of looked around at these things that she had always loved. She loves education. She loves the arts. She was in love with the sort of local stories and folklore of the community and the natural beauty that was always there in this beautiful Blue Ridge Mountain town. Regardless of the job situation, the beauty and the people and the culture and the stories were there. And she created a week-long we created a nonprofit for her. She created a week-long festival celebrating the sort of arts and culture of that community that is not only bringing people together, like you've got the Kiwanis Club and the Rotary Club and this school and some of the elected officials can't agree about anything else except this activity, which is bringing these folks together. And this is one philanthropist,
Right.
who's put something out there that the community has gotten involved with. And I think that's something that I really encourage everyone to think about it. Like Dolly Parton did it in that other example. Like she made a gift to this work that we were doing, and then she asked big corporations to join her. Random House signed on, but it doesn't have to be a national company that you're signing on. It can be the local pizza parlor that
Right.
underwrites the food for your event or whatever. But I think using your personal net, coming to it as your authentic self, bringing your whole self and your connections and your relationships and your community to it is really when things start to change, just from a straight donation to something that is much more meaningful, much more impactful.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I appreciate you coming on the Daily Ledger podcast, Chandler. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing with our team and working with our team, and obviously what you've done over the years. And what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they've listened to this and are like, man, I want to get on the phone with him, I want to contact him? What's the best way for people to contact you?
Totally. I would say go to untraditionalphilanthropy.com. That's our website. We also have social media stuff there as well, but the email, the phone number, everything is there. And we'll do a free consultation with anybody. Just love to kind of spread the word and increase the conversations that we're having. Thank you for having me on. And I got to give a big thumbs up to your team.
Oh, thank
Everyone, Logan, everyone has been fantastic to work with, and excited about doing much more together.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chandler. And